Welcome to this Lunch and Learn. Thank you for coming. My name is Arnie Snapfangers. I'm CEO of Eaglet. And Eaglet is the company behind the Eye Surface Profiler, or the ESP. And it's my honor to introduce this session to you today. And it's all about profilometry. And profilometry has been around for just a couple of years now. And yet, already 8 researchers have obtained their PhD with data coming from profilometry. There's more than 35 peer-reviewed publications out there, and many posters have been presented. And you probably will have noticed that in most of the sessions here at this GSLS, profilometry is featuring. And all of that hard work by all of these people has actually resulted in a fundamental transformation of our understanding of scleral shape, of ocular shape. It has allowed for the development of algorithms for all modalities of contact lenses. And what you see now is there's even some new freeform lenses brought to market that are purely based on profilometry data. So here we are today to shed light on that subject, and we're absolutely thrilled with this international panel of key opinion leaders. And it's my honor to introduce the moderator of this session, Dr. Tom Arnold. Dr. Arnold is a fellow of the Scleral Lens Education Society. He's co-chair of the ICSC, and you will know him as the man behind the Scleral Lens Practitioner Facebook group that is such a source of information by the community. And Tom, pleasure. Please take it away.
Thank you. It's quite an honor. Arnie, thank you very much. Thank you all for coming and spending your time with us today. I am Tom Arnold, practice in Sugar Land, Texas, and I'm very, very honored to have this esteemed panel introduce you. On my left, we have Jesus Villadori from Mexico. He's an ophthalmologist. Brian Tompkins from the United Kingdom. Melissa Barnett, who is my co-chair for the International Congress of Scleral Contacts and Globalized podcast. Sheila Morrison from Calgary, Canada, and a fellow Texan, Aaron Wolf from Austin, Texas. So they're all my friends, and many of them are my mentors, so very, very pleased. And a very important person is not able to join us today. That's Dottie Fidel from Rome, Italy, but she didn't want to miss out, so she has a message for us all.
Hello, everyone. I am so sad not to be able to be there with you at GSLS this year because of this COVID situation worldwide. So I am very glad to be able to say hello to everyone through this recording, and I thank the ESP group to allow me to say hello to everyone. So what I would like to share with you is my experience, my opinion regarding the ESP. So there are 2 methods to fit scleral lenses, with or without technology. I personally chosen to use the latest technology, the ESP, because it helps to reduce shear time and refits. It provides highly customized lenses and increases patients' trust and retention. So maximizing technology in your practice, along with clinical skills and efficiency, are crucial as they can make the scleral lens fitting process more valuable, and this can improve patients' perception of your expertise. So this will enhance the patient experience and will transform the fitting process into an enjoyable moment for patients and clinicians. So now I will let you know with these expert fitters and an exciting discussion that will be done during this session to learn more about specialty contact lenses with profilometry. So a transformation of specialty contact lenses is happening. Get ready for it. Bye-bye.
So let's get started. So I am not as experienced as a lot of these people on the panel. I've only been doing scleral lenses for about 8 or 9 years. And in that time, in that short time, we've learned so much about the sclera and the design of the sclera and how specialty lens fitting is really being transformed by profilometry. We've learned a lot about scleral shape. And Sheila, I'd like to begin with you, and then Melissa, your comments. Tell us what we've learned about the sclera and how it affects specialty lens fitting. Sheila?
You know, that scleral shape is really the basis of where we start in selecting the most appropriate lens modality for patients to ensure that they're have a great experience, a safe experience with their lenses. And I can actually speak a little bit from experiences with and without ocular surface topography. My background started off in the academic kind of world, just like all of us, going through school, my residency, and then I was fortunate to spend some time in Houston teaching, where we had access to everything, all the bells and whistles. And so ocular surface topography became a major part of our practice, of my personal practice. I went back to Canada and for a short time did not have a profilometer. And one really important thing that I learned in the absence of the technology was just how important it is for us to be able to make the most educated decisions. So measurement first and evaluating scleral shape with the technology that's available today is how we pick starting lenses. It's how we can now identify patients that may be best suited for freeform versus spherical, toric, a variety of different lens designs. And so the data today that we get from ocular surface topography is just so valuable in our practices.
Yes, we've learned so much. I'm feeling, I've been fitting scleral lenses a long time. I'll just say that. I won't say the other way, right? I'm very, very old. I'm
older, but I haven't been fitting them as long.
But we had scleral lens technology where we didn't know much about scleral shape when scleral lenses first came out. And we have the Vissers to really thank for some of the early research that was done on scleral shape, even before technology. And then Greg Denayer and the scleral shape group came up with all this fantastic research telling us that most scleras are not symmetrical, and we should be fitting these advanced lenses. And so that research has really been helpful. And then over the last few years, research has just expanded tremendously on scleral shape in general. Some things that I always like to remind myself is that those who have really highly irregular corneas, their scleras are also really highly irregular. So you could have a patient who has advanced keratoconus, and so I like to think in my head, oh, they're gonna have a scleral shape that's more irregular. But we're gonna get into not just the crazy stuff, but really how we can use profilometry in our day-to-day practice in a little bit. The other thing, just to highlight in clinical practice, different ethnicities and all the studies showing us that different ethnicities have different scleral shapes as well, so we can use different scleral lenses when we're fitting different patients. So I would say in the last few years, this has been one of the most exciting things is scleral profilometry, because we can design lenses better than we ever could before.
And I think you have a case for us.
I do. I have a case for you. So this is just one example of a patient, so 48-year-old Hispanic female. So I practice at UC Davis in Northern California, and we have a lot of patients who come from all over the world. We're a specialty practice. We get a lot of referrals, but we see a lot of patients from Mexico as well because we're in California. So she actually had RK done in Mexico, and she was saying that her vision was blurry at all distances. She is relatively young. I'm continuously surprised how these patients are so young who have had RK, and of course, highly irregular astigmatism, no big surprise. We also, very important to evaluate the ocular surface prior to fitting lenses. So she did have, and she much better controlled now, but meibomian gland dysfunction and dry eye, so doing a complete workup there. She wore corneal lenses, corneal gas permeable lenses, and here you can see her prescription. So she, at this time, was unable from a different provider to be fit with corneal lenses, and she came to me and we talked about different technologies. So here you can see her bisphere elevation maps, and kind of short and sweet case here, but she was fit with lenses in a reverse geometry design. She is able to wear the lenses all day long very, very successfully. and reports even better vision and improved comfort with this lens design. So she had pretty significant dry eyes. Now she's able to wear the lenses all day. The one thing that she is developing of interest, which I feel like everyone is developing right now, is cataracts. Everyone is coming in with cataracts. And so we're talking about that and her scleral lenses and how we're going to change that after cataract surgery. Fortunately, we don't have to change the scleral lens a lot, but the power we do have to change. So just one case of many, many, but very happy with her scleral lens design.
So I'd like to ask all the panelists to say a few words about how profilometry has changed your specialty practices. Jesus, let's start with you, and then Brian.
Well, kind of going off of what Dr. Barnett just told us, before we used to get a patient, and obviously you consider the corneal issues, but you didn't know what the sclera looked like until you put the first lens. And then you see how that lens fits, where is it, you have some impingement or the other way around, and then you would change the lens. And now we do it the other way around. First, we obviously consider still the corneal situation, but we first take the fit. Then we know what kind of sclera we're dealing with in the right eye, what kind of sclera we're dealing with in the left eye, and then we go on from there. So that's been a big change in how we approach the patient.
Do you want me to talk about how it's changed my practice or how it's changed my life?
Let's start with your life.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, can I talk dirty a minute?
It is
We're
Vegas.
in Vegas, yeah.
Seriously, yeah, we're in Vegas, but we're going to talk money because ultimately, not only are we clinicians, but we're businessmen as well. And what it's done is it's changed and enhanced the level of time and value time that we can spend with the patients because it gives the information quicker, more efficiently, and just that kind of 5 minutes of taking those examinations has cut down a lot of the experimental. And during COVID, I remember watching a lot of the gods, some of whom were in the room, talking about how to minimize fitting trial times, etc., minimize trial lenses. And that's what it does. So it's life-changing for us, and that becomes life-changing for the patient.
And that's a benefit for the patient. The patient don't want to stay in your office for 3 hours, putting on 5 different lenses while you figure it out.
Exactly.
A little loss of credibility. Melissa?
So, Don Ezekiel is here with us in spirit, right? I'm sure he's in Australia just smiling, but on our Globalized podcast, he said, do better, right? Do better for our patients. And we have the opportunity to do better with scleral profilometry. So I've had many patients come in and they're happy. They're happy. Their vision is good. Their comfort is good. I look at their eyes with and without the lens. There's no staining. Everything looks great. But now we have the opportunity to do better. So I can design a lens that they have better vision, better comfort. Are we going to talk about multifocal sclerals? I hope so. We can provide better vision at all distances with scleral profilometry.
Dr. Morrison?
Some of the questions that have been coming in since I arrived after our Scleral Society workshop yesterday surround practice management. So I thought I would just take this opportunity to share some key points in our practice in regards to how profilometry and technology in general can benefit your practices. One important area is the tech is impressive to patients, and so we actually use it almost as a practice builder to enhance the whole patient experience along the way. Patients in our office absolutely love the process of being able to see on a big screen their full ocular shape so that we can explain to them, if I'm putting you in a higher cost freeform or impression-driven lens, these are my evidence-based reasons for why we would ask you to go down that path. And these are the reasons why we would maybe choose a different lens design. Patients buy into the process more when they're involved, just like anything. And so as a practice builder, using the tech to be impressive in our marketing attracts patients to our clinic. We get patients that come, find out that we're one of few centers in our area, which is growing exponentially in regards to the technology kind of running through as we have more time and better education and everything is advancing. At one point, corneal topography was fairly novel, and not every specialty fitter had it, and look at us now. So we use it in our office as a practice builder and also just as something to kind of make sure that patients can follow along the process. And then number two, staff training. I use Profilometry to speed up everything for me in the clinic. And so I don't actually, once I've evaluated a patient's history and had a quick word with them, we can actually have our staff use the data from the ESP to select a starting lens, put it on their eye. I don't even see the patient for any of that process until that's all done, and that saves me a ton of time, and I can see more patients within my schedule.
Aaron.
Hard to follow all of that. Well said. So I'm going to piggyback on a little bit of each of, I guess, what y'all have mentioned. So from a practice management standpoint, I've also noticed that it's helped my relationship with my corneal specialist in town. So there's a little bit better communication regarding shared patients. I've noticed an increase in referrals. One, knowing that I have that technology, but this is also information the corneal specialist doesn't have. I mean, they look at the cornea, but you send back a scleral profilometry, that's not something they're used to seeing. So you're providing them some information that they didn't previously have. For efficiency, I would totally agree with just less time in the office. It's easier to delegate, just like Sheila mentioned. You run a scan with the results of the scan, depending on which scleral lens you like to use, which at this point is actually most of the scleral lenses pretty much any of us use. You can actually select a starting point lens if you do want to continue to do an in-person fit. If you find that that's somehow more efficient. I personally don't do it that way. I just basically empirically order, which is also I believe more efficient than it used to be. But also just fewer visits to the office. So, Tommy mentioned, hey, nobody wants to be there for 3 hours. Well, also, nobody wants to come back 5 times. So what you're trying to do, and as your practice grows, which if you're here at the conference, your interest is in growing your practice, whether it's just your skills in the practice or growing your business component of the practice. But as your practice grows, the time that you can afford to each of these patients is going to diminish. So you're going to have to find ways to become more efficient, and the Eaglet is the best way I've found to get there.
Melissa?
Yeah, so Aaron, just some great points there, which reminded me of a patient right now who, this is a patient who came to me with end-stage glaucoma, and he did not want a glaucoma surgery because he was fit elsewhere by scleral lenses. He was afraid he couldn't wear scleral lenses. And I said, oh no, there's so many things that we could do. But we could do profilometry, we could do impression-based, we could do all these things. So I'm having that conversation now with the patient and the glaucoma surgeon, and just having the conversation that we have this technology that can help you in so many unique ways that the glaucoma surgeon had no idea about. Mm-hmm. So great point.
Good point. Let's talk about some of the differentiating factors in this technology versus other technologies, what we call features and benefits. First, Dr. Tompkins, and then Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you've got to understand, ESP rocks. It is, ultimately.
Dr. Tompkins will be performing in the lounge after 5, so be sure to check his show.
It is just something to have in your practice. It's. I go back to the business model again. It's a USP because, I guess we're not all in the same town. We're not in the same country. So each one of you who is looking at potentially getting an ESP machine device, you will become the only person in your town, in your city, in your country, in Jesus' case, to really have that quick assessment, and it's smart. And the device itself, I mean, there's not one in this room, but there'll be one later, I know, kind of looks funky. It's impressive. It's a mini version of Star Trek. And when we had ours, we adopted it because we called it Eddie, because the eagle. You've got to watch the film Eddie the Eagle, but anyway. And so you have it as one of your kind of elements in it's part of the family within the practice. And it is a leading technology that is growing and growing and growing. And now it's a kind of a must-have. So anybody that doesn't, you're going to be left behind.
And this is in a practice that is 150 years old? Is that correct? Now, Brian's not that old, but the practice... He's getting close, but
153 years this year.
153 years in.
Yeah, in June time. And my late partner, who was the grandson of the original founder, he was a big investment in technology. And Tom's seen a photo of, and actually seen the kit. I've got an old ophthalmometer from the late 1930s. And that was the instrument of its day. And the ESP is now the modern version of that measuring.
Amazing.
And
amazing.
it's going full circle.
Yeah. Dr. Villadora, you come from an ophthalmology family, right? Father, uncle, now you. And what are the features and benefits that attracted you to the Eaglet?
Well, so for us, and by the way, we are pretty new. We have three or 4 months that we got our ESP. So I'm kind of representing the early stage of the learning curve. And talking about that, one of the really nice things that the Eaglet team does is the setup is so easy. Pretty much you get the thing out of the box. It looks great, as you said. And it's a couple minutes to get running. Even now with COVID, we didn't get in-person training. But they have this online kind of course system with tests and everything, and in a couple days we were taking already our first shots. Actually, the presentation, the case report is going to be of our first patient. So that was really easy, that was really nice. The other thing that I think for us has been a big change is in the way we communicate with the labs. In our specific case, we work with 2 labs here in the US, Boston site and Aculens, and we have first a language barrier because several of us work on the team. And so sometimes we have to be describing and sending pictures, the patient has an elevation here and we try to measure it. And now we take the shot, we send them the shot, and we're both looking at the same thing. It's an objective reading. So that has been amazing for us. And it's less time with the patient, but it's also less time ordering the lenses and designing the lenses. So that has been great.
Well, you have a case for us.
Okay, so this was actually our first case. We did some shots among ourselves, with our staff and ourselves. And then we coincidentally had this 31-year-old patient. She's a Hispanic female. She's from a different part of Mexico. And she got LASIK surgery done in 2012 when she was 21 years old. Unfortunately, developed post-LASIK ectasia in her right eye and developed also dry eye in both eyes, more so in the right. In the same city, they placed an intrastromal corneal ring in the inferior part of the cornea, which unfortunately she faced then a couple months later extrusion of the ring, so it had to be surgically removed. They did cross-linking on that eye and then also on the left eye, which they were following up closely with topographies and started seeing some changes, so they went ahead and cross-linked. At that point, she moved to our city in Monterrey, Mexico, and was referred to us. And she had a visual acuity of 20/200 in her right eye, the one that had the rings put in and taken out, and 20/40 in the left eye, and some discomfort due to dry eye. We got her in the office, we talked to her about sclerals. Everywhere is still an expensive technology, and in Mexico more so. So we went ahead and fitted her more problematic eye, which in this case was the right eye. We had to do 3 remakes to get a good lens, and were able to get her happy. This was back in 2016, and she was 20/20 and got at least 8 hours of comfortable wearing time. Sometimes, took the lens out in between in lunchtime, so she could extend for some more hours. So this is an example of a patient that was already happy, but now that we got to make lenses for her using this new ESP technology, as you will see, she was way more happy. So this is actually a couple months ago that we got the ESP in our office. So we scanned both of her eyes, just because we were also kind of practicing. And she was only going to do it for her right eye. You can see that in the right eye, this is the bisphere elevation map that the ESP gives you. You see a fairly spherical scleral shape. And that's why we have been able to get her happy with spherical haptics 5-6 years ago. But on the left side, and I was a little bit surprised, then you have a more complicated scleral shape, more complicated conjunctival situation as well, with some big elevations, especially at 3 p.m. and also at 4 p.m. So when I saw that, because when I started showing her the ESP and the images, she said, oh, I want to get it now in both eyes. So a little bit what Dr. Morrison was telling us, when they see the images and you get the 3D scan in the TV and everything, they get really excited as well. So I said, okay, let's do both eyes. We'll talk first about the right eye. This is basically what we did is we took the shot with the ESP. We sent it in, this is a lens made with Aculens. We sent it to the Aculens lab. We sent them the previous lens parameters with the previous lens over refraction. We didn't even put a new lens on top of the eye, and told them, you know, let's see what you can do with this. We were kind of testing out the technology, and they sent us this lens, which, as you can see, fits really nicely. The eye looks white. You have nice coverage on the OCT images. You get this fluorescent pattern that the ESP also gives you, where basically you see, in this case, that there's coverage all around. So she was instantly really happy with that, and we'll discuss some of the results a little bit later. On the left eye, which was the first time we put scleral on that eye, and it was a more complicated eye in terms of the scleral topography. As you see in this image in the bottom left, the lens haptic has an elevation. This is a free-form lens, and that's actually about 300 microns elevation. It was a big conjunctival elevation we had to get over. And this was, we didn't have to measure anything. It was basically done off the scan. And again, you see a white eye in happy patient, you know, happy eye. So basically, this is on the top. This was her previous situation. She was a happy patient with 20/20 who got about 8 hours of comfortable wearing time in her right eye, and that took us 3 remakes to achieve back in 2016. Now, in 2021 it was, we did both lenses that we described. Both were done on the first order. She's getting 13 hours of wearing time. And she's very happy because now she resolved the dry eye issue in her left eye as well. Plus, she was also, one of the things she wanted to is to not have an asymmetrical lid opening, so she was also very happy with that. So that was her first patient. Obviously, they don't all go that way, but we're really excited for her, and she's now in love with both of her sclerals.
Well,
And you.
And you, yeah. Well, you have a clue of what's going on. You can look at it and know, you can anticipate some of the issues, like the pinguecula that you had and stuff like that. Yeah. Well, it's the fitters, like Melissa mentioned earlier, Don Ezekiel, you know, Ken Pullum, the Visors, you know, going all the way back to Joseph Dallos. These are people that just had to put lenses on and just kind of keep working until they could fit. I guess, and this is a term I think Melissa, in preparing for this, said, yeah, really, it's the end of educated guesswork. Melissa, let's speak to that.
Sure. So I think, you know, talking to some of the labs, it's really important, just a few things. The first fit algorithm is really helpful. So we have a lens that's suggested to us to put on the eye, but we still need to put a lens on the eye. And the reason I bring this up is just talking to different labs, they're getting the scans, but not getting the diagnostic lens information. So it is really helpful, I think, at least to have one lens on the eye so you can make appropriate changes. You can over-refract and have a really good lens for the patient. Maybe all of them could be the first fit lens like you have. I mean, that's amazing. But you have that information. Now, the direct connect for us in the US is super helpful because, and it's alphabetized, thank you so much. That was a big deal, but we can send just directly to the lab so that communication is very fast and very easy. And it gives us so much more information. The other thing that we haven't touched on, just is the importance of staff training though. We do need to train our staff. I know in my staff, it did take a little bit of training to capture the images correctly because we do want an image of the whole entire eye. And I have staff now, they're excellent. They're not quite as good as Sheila's staff though, because I'm telling my staff which lens to put on. And she's having her staff do that, which is great. I mean, that's a time-saving technique. But having the staff take the proper image is really important just to get all the information to send that directly to the lab.
It's true. I found that when we introduced this technology, in training the staff, identify your strongest technicians, really train them, and it empowers them. It makes them part of the process. They're proud of this. It is a time saver, obviously, but also involves them in the process. So they're not just a functionary. They're involved in the fitting of the lens and things, and it's great for the staff. We're going to talk a little bit about how you take this information and communicate with the lab. So first to Brian, let's talk about the first lens fit algorithms, Brian, and all the labs that we can
Just before
use.
I get onto that, I think it's really important to understand that the capturing of the image is really crucial. Now, I'm going to say to Arnie here that it was bloody hard for a long time, and because I think I've had the device 6, 7, 8 years or more now, a long time. But it's got now, so the software during the COVID situation where they had to sit on their butts and do development, they couldn't go out and see customers. It just flew in the last couple of years, absolutely amazingly. But capturing is a technique you have to master, either the text or yourself, whichever it is, and getting just the right cocktail mix of the fluorescein mix to get on the eye is also super crucial, and having that uniform is very valuable. But once you've got that beautiful image, which the patients are knocked out by, then you just literally go click, 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 design whatever lens you work with. And I don't know, it's about 15 or 16 different designs within the whole software. And there's no, you can only work with this company. There's virtually any company that any of you will be utilizing is on this with the algorithms. And if your company isn't, talk to the guys because they can get them on at some stage, This is the go-to next development machine to have. So you are picking the company, you're picking the design within the company, and you just go, click, tell me that lens. And it's like this magical appearance, like thing blossoming out of the ground, and you get the first lens. And there you go. And as everybody's said so far, that is often, like Jesus' case, the first lens fits, and that's it, out the door. So that's kind of where it is.
Makes you look better, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it would be nice, but as Britain is a very underdeveloped third world country, we have a lack of the direct connect. And direct connect is not only do you have the design and the first lens to fit in that trial, because as Melissa said, I think it's really important to have a lens on the eye. Some neophytes would not have experienced it until you've ordered the lens. Well, imagine the worst case, you try and put it in and they're fighting you off and it's not going to work. So,
But I like to put it on the eye, and then they say, "Oh, it's so comfortable,"
Often,
It's great, and my vision is so good.
But you're doing that with that trial, the first
Yes.
trial that's been suggested, and then their own lenses, well, it's like a breeze straight after then. And direct connect is the way to go directly to the laboratory, which one day in Britain we'll get, but at the minute.
Well, we have it in Texas, and I think Aaron has some experience in
Everything's
that.
bigger in Texas, come on.
And in California.
And in California. No, I'm
No.
making a joke, of course, but it is available with a lot
It's
of
very
labs.
convenient.
Yeah.
One day, Brian. One day.
Well, we'll get you there, Brian. Aaron,
Yeah, I
talk
can
about
speak
your
to
experience.
Direct Connect, but I want to add a couple things to the first lens fit. So from a practical standpoint, especially as I'm in private practice. I'm in private practice. It's just myself, and I have one doctor there one day a week when I'm not there. So really, it's kind of a one-man show pretty much. So how it used to be is you would come to one of these shows, you would hear about a new fit set where there's some new innovation, and you'd be excited, so you'd buy that fit set. And you get some experience with that lens, and then the next year there's already a new lens that everybody is using, and it's better somehow. So then you decide, okay, do I buy another fit set? I guess I will. They're worth it, so I buy another one. And then 6 months down the road, there's somebody else coming with some new innovation, and it's impressive, and then you want to stay on top of your game, so then you buy another fit set. And before you know it, every year you're just buying new fit sets, and you're not using the old ones because the technology has moved by. I see some heads nodding. Everybody, has kind of been there. So with the Eaglet, you're no longer having to constantly chase the innovation. You are essentially just waiting for the next software update. So the innovation is happening amongst the labs and amongst their designs. and then it's going to update, and then before you know it, you're already at the cutting edge, and you didn't have to buy anything that you didn't already own at that point. So I'm a big fan of the first lens fit. I love, I guess, hearing about what else is coming out. I also think it drives a lot of the innovation that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years. Like even a couple years ago, there wasn't really any, well, actually, there exactly wasn't any freeform lenses. Now there's like 5 or 6 of them maybe out there. So, and this is all from competition. So as somebody comes up with a better way of vaulting over pingueculas or centering a lens, freeform designs, next it will be HOA optics or whatever, the Eaglet is providing this open platform that as a Eaglet user, you get to decide which lens or lab company you want to work with, and it may not be a lab company that you've ever worked with before. Okay, so love everything about that in the first lens fit. Direct Connect is essentially just a like an export file type of system, but instead of like exporting an image, you're exporting the entire raw data. So if you like to work with a particular company, and the more of these companies that are using Eaglet, and it's growing seemingly by the month, you can take your information, you can just send the whole thing, the whole raw file, and then you can place an order, but you can call your lab consultant, and they're looking at the exact same thing that you're looking at. And if they disagree or have a better suggestion, or maybe you want a more hands-off approach, whatever it is, now your lab has that information too.
Yeah, they're seeing what you see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Aaron, just based on our conversations, just chatting about this presentation, how often do you find that in your practice you are ordering empirically from your ESP versus taking the data, looking at that elevation map, and selecting a lens and building lens yourself? At this point in your practice, which direction do you find you're using the most often?
Just to make sure I understand the question, how much am I doing empirically, and
so
then,
building
and
the
then how much
shape,
am I
putting
doing
yeah, so
like
are
a
you
diagnostic
ordering,
lens?
yeah, are you asking the labs at this point to order empirically? If yes, how successful has that been for you? Versus making those changes off of diagnostic sets now that you're using ESP for almost all your fits, if not all of them?
Yep, pretty easy answer now that I understand it. 100%. So I actually bought my Eaglet in July of 2020. So this was right pretty soon after we were coming out of the COVID, shutdowns, or whatever you want to call these things. I was that person who just collected fit sets, and I was like oddly proud of it, because I thought it somehow made me a better scleral lens fitter, because I had like 15 fit sets at one point, and most of my had just wasn't using. So the once we started doing the Eaglet, there was a sanitary aspect where we just didn't have to worry about disinfecting scleral lenses anymore. I think, Melissa, you've done some work regarding a lot of this. I just didn't really want to deal with it. In the past, we would have had times where we're disinfecting lenses from a lens I used an hour before on a different patient. I grab a different fit set, not because I really want to, but because this one's still being busy disinfecting, so I can't use it now. And so there's all these practical aspects. So I 100% do empirical fitting. I do put on a diagnostic lens, to Melissa's comment earlier, of the lens that I'm trying to fit, if possible, or if nothing else, like just a rigid, like just a corneal gas perm for over-refraction purposes. But I like to get over-refraction before I place that order. So I am still putting something on the eye, but it's really not for observation of fit. I'm really doing it just for refractive purposes. That tells me obviously what I'm going to order in the power, but it tells me if I'm going to need front surface astigmatism. If I find I'm going to need front surface astigmatism or front surface toric on the lens optics, that does guide a little bit in my lens selection. All these lenses provide front surface toric options, but what I mean by that is, if anybody was in the Boston site meeting this morning, I presented a case just like it. Sometimes, and actually this is true for Jesus's right eye that he presented earlier, is very spherical eye. Well, if you have very spherical sclera, which isn't all that common, it's pretty rare, but you also have front surface toricity, what are you going to do then? Because now that lens is going to rotate and you're not going to get stability. So it will actually guide which lens selection I'm going with. And one last comment, and this is probably true for everybody, there's probably been many times when I had a preconceived notion of which lens I was going to fit somebody in. I just kind of, for a various number of reasons, I kind of thought that patient I'm going to put in this lens, let me get the scans, and once I get the scans, I realize that's no longer a good lens for that person.
Yeah, the conjunctiva can be very, I would say, opposite of forgiving. So we can sometimes even make mistakes. Profilometry eliminates that mismatch where we have a lens that does settle in a way that isn't necessarily always completely transparent to the true ocular shape. Just because that tissue can kind of be variable between patients and depending on how much settling time you leave. So it's a really interesting thing to look at all these things. Just to build on what Melissa has said earlier about the diagnostic lenses for our patients. So we do all use a diagnostic lens for power. One important patient base that we still apply a diagnostic lens on, as you said, is those dry eye patients to really show them the fit. In Aaron's case, an irregular eye are looking for power only, not as important. I'll often do refits with the ESP with existing patients that are failing out of their lenses or not satisfied based on fitting or comfort. And in those cases, I design fully empirically now, where we can actually use the data to design a lens, pull the prior parameters from the last GP that they have, as long as that was, fairly close to optically neutral, and then we go from there. So, the sky's the limit, really, with empirical lens design, and I think that's heading into our next area. But I'll pass it over to Tom to introduce.
Well, one of the questions that we get a lot when we discuss this at meetings and so forth is, do I need a topographer? Okay, do I need a topographer? And the point being that the Eaglet ESP is a full-featured topographer as well as profilometer. And so I want to spend a little time with that. In that we have axial maps, tangential maps, elevation maps, all these different maps. So it is full-featured. And I started out life as a -7 myope, and so myopia control means something to me. And it is very exciting in the last few years how we've become much more aware of myopia control, myopia management, and of course, ortho-K fitting. And for that, we need good corneal data. So I think, Sheila, you have a case for us, a couple of cases.
Couple slides, couple cases, keep it cash.
Go for it.
So interestingly, when I first started working with the ESP, it was also close to maybe, 6 or more years ago, 7, maybe more, when it was a beta unit. And at that time, we did look into, this is before all the software became so good, looking at how reliable and how accurate are the scans in terms of, on the sclera and on the cornea. In the past, we've really had a big disparity in technology as we build and grow. Our industry really responds to our needs as practitioners in terms of what we need to measure on the eye. Units in the past that were needed for different parts of the eye had to be totally separate. So one unit that was really, really good at measuring corneal topography couldn't necessarily get out onto the eye past the cornea, and vice versa. And the nice thing today is that we do have technology that is now built into units, into the ESP, that does allow us to blend all of our needs, and the technology is really maximized. Not only is our scleral data very accurate, the cornea data has really come a long ways to the point where we can now utilize ESP for other applications, not just fitting sclerals. I think the launch was maybe last September for the ortho-K fitting. And so we'll just talk a little bit. Dr. Wolf and I have a couple of case examples, and it's really an exciting time because in the big picture, if we think big and we dream, how cool is it to have, looking down the road, an instrument that could literally take a scan of an eye and get everything, including power and all these different measurements, and we're headed in that direction. Super units that can do more than one function, and in a practice, that is incredibly important to maximize your investment, maximize your return on your investment, units that can do more than one thing. And so we're excited to talk a little bit about the new capabilities for fitting and evaluating ortho-K lenses with the ESP. So a couple of focus points for me. One of them initially is the precision with initial lens selection. So that's where we started. Number 2 we'll talk about is how empirical design is useful in our practices and how does the ESP provide that for us. And then just a few more training tips, again, to build off of comments from the rest of our panel regarding the importance of excellent data. So I always say junk in equals junk out. I think actually one of my mentors said that to me a long time ago, as is with most professions and most things that we create in this world. The data that goes into designs to make something have to be good so that the result is good. And so that's why we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about training for staff in this presentation too. The ESP is now able to take an accurate measurement of corneal shape. So we can look at curvature, elevation data, and there's two ways that we can use this in the clinics. Through software like FitConnect, for example, we can actually use the same pattern and the same flow in the clinic for designing ortho-K lenses, where we have the data essentially run through an algorithm and we can create a lens that way. It can go straight to the manufacturer. Second way that I use it is just pulling numbers from the instrument the old-fashioned way, and that works just as well. Empirical lens design we've talked a fair bit about, so we'll just kind of move forward. And just knowing, again, the whole story, everybody has their own unique fingerprint, and the data that we collect from ESP allows us to properly evaluate that. Even looking at an ortho-K lens that I'm thinking about fitting for somebody, do I want a toric landing, or should they be more spherical? The same rules as we apply to the sclera apply to the cornea for our ortho-K fits, and the ESP is now capable of handling all of that. I just want to take a quick minute to point out the importance of having an option for empirical lens design in myopia control practices. So a lot of us here have multiple modalities in our offices. So not only just sclerals, we do myopia control, we do custom soft, we do cornea GPs. And one thing that I've noticed that's a huge benefit that now the ESP is able to provide for us is that whole empirical design flow. And when it comes to our myopia practices, the patient experience is very, very important. Kids come in and they have only so much energy. The parents there's a lot of time we need to spend discussing things in a myopia control clinic. And so empirical design has become a huge important part of our practice. And the cool thing that we're going to show you is a way that we can do this using the CRT lens in terms of empirical lens design just directly off of the ESP. So we've talked a little bit about, the importance of quality in. Just a couple quick tips for the group, because I have now had some experiences looking at the ESP measurements on younger patients. Some of our scleral lens patients, often it's not as common to fit children, but with ortho-K, a lot of our population is the opposite. We're looking at fitting more and more children for myopia control. And so some of little things that we've picked up in our office along the way, it's not necessary to numb the eye, but a lot of patients we do. I was talking with Renier last night, I think it was, about how often globally are people numbing the eye. Some do, some don't. Oftentimes it's depends on your patient, and for me, for the kids that we're fitting ortho-K, I like to, because it just makes the process smoother for them. Occlusion of the fellow eye when we're taking measurements is very helpful to get them to keep their fixation and get the data that we want. And then building off again of Melissa's comments about that real estate. So it's not as important with ortho-K to get scans out to that 22 millimeters. So don't worry about that in the office. What we need is the cornea, but it's still, we want to aim for the stars. So try to get as much data on the top and bottom of the cornea as possible. And one way you can do that is just looking for the white crescent. So you want to try to position the head so that you're getting the real estate you want. You can do all kinds of tricks in the office. Sometimes put the chin rest a little higher if the eyes are deeper set, and that forces them to kind of tip back, pull the lower lid. It all works out on children. And I thought it would be challenging, to be quite honest, with fluorescein, and it really isn't. It works out just fine, the same as it works for adults. Do you have any issues measuring your ortho-K kids? I'm just going to pass it over to you for measuring children. How do you find that in your office? Because this is new for kids, right, in this modality?
Yeah, so I would, we've dabbled with not using anesthesia, and then we've kind of gone back to using proparacaine. At first, I tried not to use proparacaine on kids sometimes because I kind of can
keep it natural, right?
Yeah, it can also set you off to a bad start if they get some uncomfort or discomfort from that. And but actually, we're back to it, and it's working just fine. I would 100% agree with your comment about you're not really that concerned about the sclera. With scleral profilometry, we're used to seeing these 20, sometimes 20 plus 24 millimeter scans, and they're really impressive. But when you're trying to measure the sclera, you really want really good scleral data. When you're trying to measure the cornea, you want really good corneal data. So yeah, we pretty much barely get kind of pulled the lids open past the cornea, trying to keep the absolute most pristine tear film evenness.
What solutions does the rest of the panel use for fluorescein when you apply? I'm curious. I want to hear from what everyone else is doing. Do you use really viscous, high-low, saline?
We put it on. There's a fantastic resource that we are all on, and you can join if you get the toy. It's called the Eaglet's Nest, and it's kind of a forum discussion group, and it's really helpful because we're all helping each other, a bit like we would on many of the other Facebook groups. But we're lucky in the UK, this is where we score, that we have a thing called minims. Now, minims are little tiny 0.2 millimeter drop dispensers. And so what we found some couple of years ago now was that if we took a fluorescein minim, which is consistent in its concentration, we use the anesthetic, so we have an anesthetic minim, and that's at 0.2, and then we use one of the little mini vials of 0.2 or 0.3 hyaluronic, and we put them all into a little contact lens tray, so squeeze, mix it up like a witch mixing the cocktail.
It's like a cocktail.
And then you take the 2 minims that are empty and suck it back up, and then you've got 2 patients, but it's consistent. So every single time you do the scan, you've got the same wetness of... Now, the patient is not always the wettest in the world, which we know. So we've now, for the last few years, Kyriakos over in Cyprus came up with this idea, have them preload the wetness of their conjunctiva for 2 days before, so hourly drops. So it's a good technique to get the patient to be better for you, because they let you down so often.
Ask them to do it every 2 hours, it'll be every 4.
Yeah.
So Brian, on that note, just before we move on into a case regarding an ortho-K case, I know that this group, I recognize most of you, a lot of you, and there are practitioners using the ESP in this room. There are probably some that are new, some considering it. Could you give a just 30-second, how do you take the images? So how do you do it with the lids? What do you have to do? Sit your patient down, line them up, and how do you take the image?
Yeah, and it's a 2-person job, if I'm honest. We like the interaction between either the tech or actually quite often myself and my optom colleague, Kaya, do it together. And we use a variety of techniques to lift the lid, and you really need to get it out of the way. And I know that Anu and the team said, look, don't be afraid to hurt the patient because you're really lifting that lid out, pressing against the orbital bone, dragging the bottom lid down. So they're not going to dry out quickly during that time. And the nice thing is once you've got those lids completely out the way with a nice uniform covering of tears, you take 3 images, bang, 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 and use those. If one's gone wrong, doesn't matter, but you take 3, click, 3, you do the images one by one. And then you can have a look at them and say, well, that's a great one, done, first time, that's it, out the door. If not, then you take again, and it's not the end of the world. Use a Q-tip, because we don't have Q-tips, we have cotton buds in the UK, and they kind of roll the lid slightly. There's a very clever piece of kit made by Oculus, different company, and it's got a silicon end on a small Q-tip like rod, and that rolls beautifully. And I think one of you guys has made one. Somebody's made a silicon-ended kind of.
We
device.
used in our clinic. We used a Q-tip cotton swab with the wooden handle, and that worked very, very well. Yeah.
So I
Pretty
think
easy to do.
Yeah, the 2-person is just great in our clinic. So we had one technician kind of working on it, but now they just grab a second technician who holds open the lids. I think that is key. That really got our scans to be 100% better.
I do the same thing. And how long start to finish, Melissa, from for the acquisition? So patient sits down, how much time does it take?
It varies, honestly, based on the patient. Some are a little bit more difficult to capture than others based on the eye shape, but it's very quick. The technician they're doing it when I'm seeing another patient, or a few other patients.
My
so
point
it's
with that is
very
agreed
fast.
that it's fast. It's fast and easy. So, yeah.
And,
I'd like to-
it's something that the patients enjoy the process because, as you said earlier, and Jesus with the pinguicula, particularly if you put it into the 3D model, they're seeing bits of their eye and the shape of their eye. They realize how they're so awkward for us and they're making our lives difficult. And it's good to show that to them.
Or they see how cool their eyes are, which I think, and the shape.
Yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of variation between preferences and how to obtain the images. I do like to be involved with the images for profilometry because going back to the conversation about efficiency and time, it may be a little bit more my time involved in collecting the scans, but it's just like if anybody in the room fits, Ortho-K, it's much better to spend extra time getting the most perfect scans possible than to go back and have to chase bad scans. So I actually do like to be involved with the obtaining of the scleral profilometry images. I'll usually be the holder because I trust my techs to be able to aim a joystick or whatever better than pulling the lids. I would like to share my protocol since I think a lot of the attendees are U.S. Based doctors, and there is something available to the U.S. that has worked pretty well. I've tried a number of different things over the last year and a half, but Optase, and I have no financial disclosures in the drop Optase, but I will give them a shout out. So that is a preservative-free drop. It has hyaluronic acid in it, and it comes in a multi-use bottle. So we actually have our patients discontinue all contact lens wear, whether it's soft, rigid, scleral, or whatever. We just kind of have an overall protocol that they just discontinue all contact lens wear in the eye or eyes that we're going to be mapping for 3 days, and I just tell them to basically drown their eyes every hour, every couple hours. I want them to constantly be putting that drop in the eye, so that any kind of SBK they might have or whatever, by the time that they roll in 3 days later, that's all resolved. And we're very adamant about just basically practically drinking that stuff through your eyes. And then when they come in, we have them do it some more. We use the Optase on the fluorescein strip.
Let's talk about the case that we did.
Well,
that
perfect
with.
segue. It's a dry eye patient that usually has SPK. So this is actually used with permission. This is my actual patient. She's one of our staff, and she is excited to be famous in Vegas today. And she presented as a new patient, myopic, a little bit of astigmatism. Her biggest issue is contact lens dropout. So we talk about ESP use for scleral lens patients, Ortho-K myopia control. We also have other applications outside of myopia control for Ortho-K. So in this case, it's a dry eye case. You can see her refraction there. So not a particularly out of the ordinary Ortho-K fit, although on the left eye, for some, it may be getting, you're getting astigmatism and kind of moderate myopia. So we took measurements. I threw this in here just to show you for the case for completion to include her lid scan. So she's struggled. She suffers, and she can't wear her soft contacts during the day. With the Eaglet, we're now able to utilize it for Ortho-K. And so what you're looking at here is our map of Brooke, showing her elevation map. And that's the data that we like to use when designing Ortho-K lenses. I'll just flip through the screens, and then we're going to pass over to Dr. Wolf for a second case and make sure that we do have time for questions, because there might be, if any of you have things that you're wondering about, we'll make sure that we have time for that today as well. But we wanted to walk you through what the software looks like. Here is an example of our corneal elevation map of the same patient. And her baseline map. This is how we use the software to empirically predict and design a CRT Ortho-K lens. So in this field, we can select, in this case, CooperVision, Paragon CRT, and the software will predict our starting lens, similar to like a slide rule, but it's completely done independently through the Eaglet folks and all the algorithms that they've expanded on over the past 12 plus months, and to create the data that we need for our Ortho-K lens. Now, this does connect with Direct Connect that Dr. Wolf had talked about, and to make the order process really smooth, everything's digital, so it speeds things up a lot in the practice. There's a record of everything that you're doing. Things go straight to the manufacturer for the order, if you choose to. And this is the lens on the first lens. So as we can see, this is an absolute beautiful lens. I did not fabricate this. This was Brooke's first lens based on her ESP. And the lens looked so great that I decided to take some artsy photos of it, and away she went. So we can look at difference display maps now with the ESP as well. So for Ortho-K fitters, we know we need to look at our power change, but also tangential curvature as a primary measure of the centration of that lens when the patient sleeps. All very doable and very effective at this point with the software. And then here's a little closer up here, just showing difference maps. So we have axial curvature on the, well, this isn't a difference map. This is a difference map. And then here's our axial and tangential curvature maps as well, all generated from the ESP. So Dr. Wolf has a case to share as well, and so I'll pass this over to you at this point.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so one of the reasons I think that we're going to start to see the use of profilometry or elevation-based data more in ortho-K is I think we started, we definitely see that in scleral lenses. A lot of ortho-K years ago was a little bit more base curve, curvature radius type of terminology. Now we're starting to see a lot of these ortho-K designs are really switching more to just elevation data. For kids, there's a pretty generous amount of working space to deal with, and that can sometimes be a challenge with certain topographers. A lot of topographers, especially like small cone topographers, will get really, really close to the eye. It can make it a little hard to get good images on like very prominent brow bones, deep set eyes, long eyelashes, things like that. The Eaglet, if you get a chance, definitely go look at it in the exhibit hall. But you got a lot of space there to you yourself or a staff member try to get some better scans. It's also particularly comfortable for kids, maybe sometimes even more so than some of those other devices. What I've found over the ortho-K fits is that basically because at elevation point, you just reveal central islands a lot better. And central islands are just something that just kind of plagues us as far as ortho-K fitting sometimes. Topographers tend to extrapolate data, which can sometimes kind of mask central islands. This doesn't do any extrapolation. The Eaglet's just raw real data, so it just kind of highlights those a little bit. And sometimes when you have a vision you're not quite, you're expecting maybe a little bit better, it does a great job at that. This is an example of just an ortho-K fit that's just maybe a little bit off-centered, and sometimes if it's a little bit off-centered and it's going through your pupil axis, you're going to get a little bit more glare, flare, halo, maybe a little light sensitivity. Also, a lot of these devices tend to be kind of bright, so now you're compounding that light sensitivity. The Eaglet actually is taken in the dark, and it's kind of like a purple kind of flash. It's actually very gentle, so it works great for those cases. These are just a variety of corneal topography maps I've done. These are all axial maps. You're going to notice, a very prominent kind of dark blue in your higher myope cases. Again, we already talked about that slide. That's just a little mild central island. This is the same. This is just a mild, lower myope case. You're going to see a little bit less color here, but also you're going to notice that the treatment zone is a little bit bigger. A little bit of a decentered pattern, and then on the bottom, this is more of a toric. Okay, this is an astigmatism case. Okay, so you're going to get that oval shape. These are just examples of tangential maps. Again, this is a normal corneal topographer as well, axial, tangential, refractive maps, corneal elevation, all is going to be provided. Again, a high myope on the left is going to have a smaller treatment zone, more prominent rings, low myope on the right, a little bit larger treatment zone. I'm going to fly through this one pretty quick, but this is basically a typical ortho-K candidate. Kind of a moderate myope, especially for 9 years old, so concerning. So we implemented some myopia management with ortho-K. She is about minus 250 on the right eye. At about a month follow-up, these are her comparison maps, or her difference maps. You can see the vision's not quite as good on the right eye. If you look in your power profile map right there, this is going to show you how much power change you've had. So 2 diopters of power change, that's going to leave us about half a diopter of the refraction. It's a 250. You basically just showing off the precision of the instrument. Very well predicted 2 diopters of change there. Okay. On the left eye, this was about a 2 diopter, about a 175 to 2 diopter myope, and same thing. If you look at the precision of the power profile, predicted it very nicely. Are there any questions?
That was a great case, and thank you for that. And where was that when I was 7 years old and probably -2, or something already? I want to have some final thoughts here from the panel, but one thing I wanted to address is, as Sheila said, we know a lot of you in the audience are very, very experienced. And what do we say, Melissa, to the experienced fitter that says, I've been doing this for years, I don't need this fancy stuff. Ken Pullum told us once at a conference, Dottie's conference, he said, just put a lens on and look at it. Well, sometimes it's we don't have the experience. So what do you say to someone who says, I do great, I don't need this?
Yeah, and that was, kind of, I was wondering when we brought this into our practice, how is this going to help my practice? And it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's completely transformed the way I fit scleral lenses. So we have the opportunity to impress our patients. We can show them the technology. They have better vision. They have better comfort. They're more comfortable with their scleral lenses. They have so many cool things that we can do with their lenses now that we couldn't do before. And so it's really a practice building opportunity for the practice. And for those of us who've been maybe fitting scleral lenses a while, it can re-energize our scleral lens practice. I mean, it's so exciting. And then there are, on some days, a few of us who are fitting scleral lenses in the practice, and a downside of having diagnostic lenses is that we might both want that same diagnostic set at the same time, and this really eliminates and minimizes the number of diagnostic lenses we need. So we might need 1 or 2 lenses on the eye versus having a whole slew of lenses. And we know that we need to properly disinfect any sort of diagnostic lens that we're using. So for example, a scleral lens, we do need to disinfect that for 3 hours in non-neutralized hydrogen peroxide solution in the practice. And that's just a lot of fitting diagnostically. We have a lot of lenses and we have a lot of solutions. We have to categorize everything and document everything. So I would encourage those of you who don't have a scleral profilometer yet to really look into it. Come talk to any of us. I'm sure we'd be happy to talk to you as well in more detail about how it's changed our practices.
Final thoughts, Dr. Vidaduri.
I think for me, the thought process was simple. If you guys thought it was good and you have a lot of experience, definitely for the rest of us should work the same way. And
we need to talk to you about whiskey.
Yeah, so it has been great. So thankful for all of you, and hope to keep learning from you, so we can use ESP in more advanced ways in the next months.
And the software is improving all the time. They're
Yes.
adding this like they're worth okay, and the software always get
That's
better.
correct.
And this is a small company, and the advantage of that is they can change, they can adapt, they want your feedback, and so forth. Sir Brian.
I think that there's perhaps a fear in the more experienced of us that this is going to take away the fitting skill set of the younger practitioners. But you still have to know what to do with the lens when it comes back. So you are effectively still having to learn the basics of how to fit sclerals, how the reservoir, etc., should be there, no touch, etc. But this just makes it more fun. So just enjoy.
Aaron, final thoughts.
I think it's kind of leveled the playing field as far as proprietary terminology. Before, having this, you had different companies to work with, and you might change the edge. One company may call it a step 1, step 2 steps, 3 steps, and you're like, well, I don't even know what that means. Another person may say 50 microns or 100 microns, and you're still like, well, is 50 microns a lot or is 50 microns a little? I don't know. And then you also have angles. There are so many different companies use different terminology for parameters in their lens. With the Eaglet, and you're looking at the lens, and you're like, okay, well, I know it's 16 millimeters. Let me see what 16 millimeters is. You can visualize it. You can use real data, real numbers, and that's made a huge difference with understanding how these different lenses are designed, but also working with your reps or consultants about change.
And Sheila.
Just a warm thanks to everybody, and we really appreciate having you here with us, and I'd like to just pass it right over to you so we stay on schedule.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good.
Yeah, of course.
Questions from the audience? I think you can use an app or something. Or just do that. The microphone is safe. Questions, please, comments? You've been a great audience. Yeah, Dr. Mora.
How long are you guys leaving the lenses off if you were going to refit?
Great question. Who wants to start?
We've done 3 days.
3 days. So the question was, well, I guess you heard it. How long do we leave it off? Yeah.
I think it depends on which lens. So a soft lens is probably going to be good for a day. But if they've got a really ingrained scleral that has been good but not as good as it could be, then probably you're looking more like 5 or 6. because the kit, the Profilometry is so accurate that I've sent lens impressions, scans off to a variety of the bespoke companies and said, will you make a lens? And they said, no, we can detect the impression of the existing lens. So that was, say, maybe at 2, 3, 4 days, and I think you just have to extend. So you have to use judgment against which lens is actually being worn.
Similar to corneal topography. Go ahead, Melissa.
Some of it is practical, right? Like ideally 72 hours, but some patients can't be out of their lenses. So if my patients are not coming from a very far distance, I can do one eye at a time, and I tend to do it on a Monday so that they can be out of their lenses over the weekend, because many of my patients can't function without their lenses. So it is possible just to do one eye at a time, but Brian's exactly right that it's so accurate, the ESP is so accurate that they can tell if a lens has been worn there.
And I have a case of that where I had a patient, a physician actually, who had really bad LASIK ectasia, corneal ectasia. She was fit elsewhere in a scleral lens so she could function, but it was not well fit. It was small. It was very tight, very congested. She could not go without the lens. It was unpossible. She said, I'm a physician. I have to work. I cannot see. So we did the best we could, made her a scleral lens that was very much better than what she had, and as the eye healed under that lens, so she could function, her eye became white and quiet, and she's better, but it changed. So then we made a second lens. So sometimes you have no choice, but if you can, I agree with about 72 hours, yeah.
No, both of you are right on my train of thought, so we've got the message out.
Yeah.
It's good, yeah.
Great question, wonderful. What else? What else? Uno, dos, tres. Well, anything else? Any closing comments? Arnie, it was a pleasure to do this. It's a pleasure to be associated with you. It's a great company. The support is tremendous. The instrument is very sturdy, and it's easy for the staff to use, but you do have to train them. So I would set aside a morning, have some workshops, and do that more than once. You know, have a refresher workshop, practice on each other, and so forth, and in a very short time. Yes, question? Oh, Dr. Chu, this is going to be a hard one. Okay.
I'm nervous.
So we know the technology is good and the clinical outcomes are good, but obviously practice management is always also important. How do you benefit financially? Do you charge for your scans? Do you bill as topography? Do you charge more for the lenses? I know there's whole insurance, no insurance, practices, but what about those who do take insurances, and how would you advise we go about not losing money by purchasing an expensive piece of equipment and also helping our patients?
Great question.
Great. So I'll answer that first, and maybe some others have some different answers for you. So in our practices, we're often getting other measurements as well. So we're getting a corneal tomography, which we're billing under the medical insurance. We're billing either for vision or medical based on the fitting, or self-pay based on that. But for the Eaglet ESP, we do a self-pay fee for that measurement alone. So it's a separate fee. It's not billed to the insurance, but at that same visit, we're still billing to the insurance for the other things.
We do things a little bit differently. In Canada, we have a little bit different insurance coverage, which is not quite as generous, believe it or not, in Canada for medical contact lenses. And so we charge a global fee for our fits when we have new equipment, and as kind of times change, we just have increased our fees a little bit over the past 2 years. By about $100 a fit, and their global fee for their fit covers their follow-ups for the year, or for the fitting process for the 90 days until the lens is finalized, and also all of our pre-measurements. So the ESP would be included in that fitting fee at our office. So we do it just a little differently.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend charging for it separately, or at least that's what I do. You can also alternatively bundle it into like your fit, but I wouldn't do that because I'm trying to highlight that I have this technology that gives you literally 500,000 data points. So I want the patients who, when they're sitting down for it, to understand the length that I'm going to provide the highest technology for them. So I would itemize it out separately as a separate charge, and make sure that you're charging fairly for your time.
And specifically for vision plans, I can speak to that. The vision plan will have a set benefits, pay for certain things. Things that are not a covered benefit can be charged. And so in our office, we said, okay, you have this insurance, this is what's covered, and then things like multifocals, notching, hydropeg, those are separate fees, and we would add them on and disclose them ahead of time to the patient. That's very important.
Do we have time for one more?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 minutes, 9 minutes.
Yeah, a couple more minutes. Yeah.
Hi, I was just curious, can this image the posterior corneal surface as well for like diagnostic reasons, or just anterior surface?
Just anterior.
It's anterior. It's not a Scheimpflug. Yeah. What else? Well, you've been great. I know we'll take questions personally here. And Arnie, but please close.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you to each and every one of you. Well, perhaps you can join me in giving a quick round of applause. Thank you for sharing all your experience, your expertise on this subject, profilometry, how it's transforming. We're overwhelmed with all your support, and come and visit us at booth number 417. If you have any questions, we have an Eaglet Eye Academy with a lot of resources for all of you to freely download. So come and enjoy the knowledge that we have ready to share with you. And we thank you so much for coming here in such great numbers.
And
thank
special
you.
thanks to Elena Barrios.
Yes, and a
slide
special thank you for
presentation.
Elena
She did a
Barrios.
lot of work.
Yeah.
And never
Thank you,
forget, ESP rocks!
Rocks!
Fun. Thank you so much for your time today. That was really fun to lecture.